Welcome to The Last Dragon, Aegon Targaryen's War, a Game of Thrones story. 20 years have passed since Bran the Broken was crowned, and the wheel was supposed to break. But peace is fragile, and the dragon sleeps no more. In the shadows beyond the wall, a forgotten Targaryen rises, and with him a dragon born of frost and fire. Written by Brian M. Brombaugh, narrated by Gareth Spokensich. The flame returns to break the wheel again. Prologue. The flame beneath the snow. They said the wheel was broken, that after dragons died and queens burned, after the north rose and the south bowed, peace had finally taken root. But peace in Westeros is a shallow grave, dug deep, filled with silence, and forgotten quickly. Bran the Broken had ruled from the shadows of his weirwood throne, a king who saw everything but said too little. For 20 years his crown held the realm in place like frost-gripping stone. Trade returned. Roads were rebuilt. Old enemies wore new colours. And yet the cold never left. Whispers spread like wind through the halls of the Red Keep, that the king spoke less each year, that his dreams were deeper, stranger, darker. Then, one day, he simply did not wake. No cry. No wound, no warning, just silence. And in that silence, a spark. Far beyond the wall, where ghosts and giants once walked, a man long thought dead walks still. Cloaked in black and burdened by names he never wanted, he lives among the forgotten. The wind calls him Snow. The fire beneath his feet calls him Targaryen. And the creature beside him, hatched in cold fire, raised in exile, answers to no crown, no king, no gods, only him. The Last Dragon. Chapter 1. The Sleeper King. King's Landing. The sky above the Red Keep was grey as ash, the kind that promised a storm but never delivered one. Below, the capital simmered with a strange, uneasy peace, sails in the harbour, ravens in the rookery, and 1,000 whispers between stones that remembered fire. Tyrion Lannister sat slumped in a high-backed chair within the small council chamber, fingers steepled, eyes narrowed at the parchment in front of him. "Imports from Oldtown have stalled again," said Sir Davos Seaworth, now master of ships. "The narrow sea's not so narrow these days, with pirates from the Stepstones harassing every wine trader with a sail. And I suppose," Bronn muttered, swirling wine in his cup, "that these pirates pay taxes on the inconvenience? Some say they're funded by the Reach. Some say by Dawn," added Samwell Tarly, hunched over a stack of letters and scrolls at the opposite end of the table. "The Dornish haven't sent a delegate to the Red Keep in over 2 years. The Dornish haven't sent anything but problems for 200, Bronn quipped. Davos grunted. "They won't stop until someone sits on the throne who knows how to rule." The room fell into a momentary silence. All eyes turned to the figure at the end of the chamber. King Bran the Broken, seated upon a simple oak and silver chair carved with the sigils of the 6 kingdoms, was still. His head tilted ever so slightly to the side. His eyes were open but distant. Tyrion stood slowly. "Your Grace?" Bran did not answer. "Your Grace?" Tyrion's voice rose with the unmistakable edge of worry. "Still nothing." Sam rose next, his face paling. He moved to the king's side, touched his shoulder gently. "Bran?" he whispered. "Can you hear me?" Then Bran's head dropped, eyes rolling white. His body did not fall or spasm. He simply disappeared behind his own eyes. His chest still rose with shallow breath, but he was no longer present in the room. Tyrion's blood ran cold. "Get the maesters. Get them now. That night." Sam stood over Bran's bed in the royal chambers, surrounded by scrolls and an ancient tome written in barely legible High Valyrian. "He's in a state I've only read about once before," he said quietly. "The children of the forest called it the root sleep. The weirwood net, those who are deeply bonded to it, can sometimes fall too far into it, so far they cannot find their way back." "And what wakes them?" asked Tyrion. Sam hesitated. "Nothing we know," Bronn scoffed. "So he's still breathing, but no one's ruling. Bloody brilliant system." Davos leaned against the windowsill, looking out over the city. "There'll be chaos soon. Word will spread. And if the king is silent, They'll ask for a voice. Tyrion finished. He looked down at the crown Bran had left on the side table. Thin, silver, unadorned, beautiful in its restraint. And who gets to wear it now? Bronn asked. The silence thickened. Winterfell. Sansa Stark read the Raven's letter twice. She did not react the first time. The second time she crumpled it in her gloved fist and stared out over the snowy battlements of her home. Behind her, Arya leaned against a column, arms folded. "It's a trap," Arya said flatly. "It might be," Sansa admitted. "Or it might be the beginning of something worse." Arya stepped forward. "You always told me, never trust a Lannister. This one's different." Sansa looked tired. "This one still wants to fix the world." Brienne entered, armor half polished, and bowed slightly. "If you go, my queen, you will not go alone?" Sansa nodded. "Prepare the guard. We ride at dawn. The north, beyond the wall." It was colder than even memory. The wind bit like a blade as Jon Snow, or Aegon Targaryen, though no soul had called him that in years, stood atop a jagged ridge of ice overlooking a vast frozen lake. His boots cracked the hoarfrost beneath him, each step sinking into white silence. Snow whipped through the air in swirling ribbons, moving like ashes from an old fire, blown across a land untouched by kings or history. Behind him a shadow shifted. Then came the beat of wings, once, then again, low and thunderous, like distant drums in the bones of the world. Ghostfyre descended from the low clouds with terrifying grace. The dragon landed in a crouch behind him, talons cracking the ice, silver-white scales gleaming with a faint sheen even under the cloud-choked sky. Its wings furled like sails after a long voyage, and steam hissed from its nostrils into the bitter cold. Jon did not flinch. He had stopped flinching long ago. He stared into the blizzard ahead of him, toward the south. He had felt something. A pull, a whisper on the wind that didn't belong to the snow or the trees or the ghosts of this ancient land. It was older than the wall, older than the Night's Watch, older even than the language of dragons. It called to him. But to understand that moment, one had to go back to the egg. Years ago, Jon had fled the realm of men, branded a queenslayer, the rightful heir who'd refused every crown. He had sought silence in the lands beyond the wall, but fate is not kind to those who carry fire in their blood. It was near the Frostfangs, in a cave older than human memory, that he had found it, or rather, that ghost had found it. Jon had been hunting elk with the free folk when Ghost vanished into the snow. Hours passed. Then a howl cut through the mountains, piercing, insistent. He followed it through an ice-locked ravine and into the shadow of a collapsed glacier. There, hidden within a cradle of obsidian and bone, lay the egg. It was warm. That was the first miracle. Buried beneath stone and snow, it should have frozen long ago. But it pulsed, slowly, softly, like the thrum of a heart, black and silver mottled with veins of deep blue. It shimmered with frost that never melted. The free folk refused to touch it. Some called it cursed. Others whispered it was a leftover gift of the children. One old woman with moss in her hair muttered, "Not dead. Waiting." Jon carried it with him for 2 seasons. He slept with it near the fire, always wrapped, always hidden. Sometimes it was cold as death. Other nights it was hot enough to scald. He had dreams of wings, of screaming fire, of shadows shaped like wolves and lions and dragons locked in endless war. And then one morning, the egg cracked. It did not burst into flame. There was no thunderclap, no scream. It simply broke. Jon had been sleeping near the edge of a cliff, fire burning low, Ghost curled beside him. When he opened his eyes, he saw steam rising from the egg, and a thin, slick shape squirming in the snow. It was no larger than a cat, trembling and wet, its wings folded like paper. Its scales were pale as moonlight, its eyes opened, silver, ringed in blue. It looked at Jon. Not like a hatchling looks at a parent. It looked like it recognized him. It crawled onto his chest, curled under his cloak, and slept. He fed it meat, taught it heat, built a stone chamber into the base of the cliffs where it could stretch its wings. The wildlings called it cursed. Jon didn't name it, Not at first, but one night, in a fevered dream, he saw a battlefield covered in snow, and above it flew a dragon, its flame pale and eerie, not red like Drogon's, but white. Ghostfyre. He awoke, sweating, and whispered the name aloud. Ghostfyre, and the dragon stirred at the sound. The years passed. Ghostfyre grew, too large to remain hidden. The beast hunted elk, bear, and once even a giant white moose the size of a cart. Its fire was strange, not golden or orange, but silver with edges of blue like starflame. It could freeze or burn depending on its breath. The dragon was as silent as Jon, as watchful as Ghost, and the bond between them deepened into something unspoken. A part of him had been missing since Daenerys died. The dragon filled that space, not with comfort but with understanding. They were both creatures of death and rebirth, both born of fire and cast into exile. Together they had carved out a new life in the north, free from thrones, free from lies, free from prophecy. But freedom is never the end of the story. Now, standing at the edge of the world, Jon felt the warmth under the ice. He knelt, one hand pressed into the snow-covered surface of the frozen lake. It pulsed, softly, not heat from the earth, not fire, magic, old, buried deep. He looked up. Ghostfyre watched him, head tilted slightly, steam curling from its mouth. It could feel it too. Jon closed his eyes. For years he had lived without names, without purpose. But something was changing. The silence was breaking. A song was starting again, and whether he wanted it or not, he would answer. King's Landing, the throne room. Tyrion stood in front of the empty iron throne. The torches flickered. No banners hung now, only bare stone and silence. Sam joined him quietly. The king may not wake. The realm cannot wait. I know, Tyrion said. We need a ruler. I've sent for her, he replied, the only one the people still trust. Sam raised an eyebrow. Tyrion turned slowly to face him. It's time to reunite the 7 kingdoms. Final line. And in the shadow of a silent throne, the game began again. Chapter 2. Snow and Smoke. The White Waste, east of the Wall. Snowflakes drifted like feathers across a world that no longer remembered warmth. Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen in name only, stood at the edge of the ruined battlements of Eastwatch by the sea. Beneath his boots, hoarfrost cracked like glass. To the south loomed the wall, still massive, still broken from where the dead had passed. To the north, silence and shadow. The keep had been little more than a skeleton when he found it. Time and rot had devoured its bones. But the free folk rebuilt what they could with stone, leather, and fire. Smoke curled from crude chimneys now. Spears rested in racks carved from driftwood, and at the center of it all, tethered to a great iron stake driven into the frozen ground, lay Ghostfyre. The dragon was fully grown now, sleek and lean, like a predator forged from moonlight and fire. Its scales shimmered silver-white with streaks of pale ash and molten gold. Its wings, massive and translucent, stretched wide in the snow wind. Ghostfyre's breath came in slow pulses, steam rising like ghosts from its nostrils. Jon approached confidently, one hand out. Ghostfyre's eyes, luminous and intelligent, flicked to him. You feel it too, Jon said softly. The pull. He brushed the dragon's snout, and in that touch was the weight of years, pain, loyalty, fire, blood. The fractured watch. Eastwatch by the sea had once stood as the last sentinel of the civilized world, the edge of the map, the wall before the void. Now, it was a broken bastion, a ruin slowly reclaimed by snow, stone, and stubborn men who refused to let it die. Within those ice-rimed towers and hastily repaired walls, Tormund Giantsbane remained as fierce and loyal as he had ever been. Age had crept into his bones, his once fiery red beard streaked with white, and his laugh, once loud enough to shake icicles loose, now came through chapped lips and wheezing breath. But his eyes burned just as bright, and his faith in Jon Snow had never dimmed. He died for the world once, Tormund told any who doubted. He'll do it again if he has to. But only this time. You best stand with him, or get the fuck out of his way. Tormund's sons, Thor, Mag, and Leaf, patrolled the cliffs by day and sharpened spears by firelight each night. His grandsons, barely tall enough to string a bow, already knew how to gut a hare and speak of dragons with reverence. To them, Jon was no king, no southern prince, no god. He was the man who burned the dead and lived to tell it. That was enough. The Night's Watch, however, had not fared as well. After the war against the dead, the Order had never truly rebuilt. Their purpose had died with the long night. Their numbers dwindled until only a few dozen remained, many no longer bound by vow, but by habit, memory, or nowhere else to go. Some wore the black with pride, others with shame. For many it was a refuge for the broken, bastards, orphans, exiles, and men who no longer fit in any other world. Jon's return had divided them. To some, he was a traitor, the man who broke his vows, murdered a queen, and fled justice beyond the wall. To others, he was the last Lord Commander who mattered, the only one who had led the watch through hell and pulled them out the other side. "I followed him through fire and snow," said one grizzled ranger. "I'll follow him through whatever comes next." Jon didn't care for titles. He never had. When called king beyond the wall, he simply shook his head and said, "We don't need kings. We need each other. We survive." Those words, repeated often around campfires, became the heartbeat of Eastwatch's revival. But not all eyes looked north with loyalty. At the base of the shattered wall, in a rebuilt outpost of black stone, Lord Commander Waelon Rook maintained what remained of the Watch's traditions. A hard man born in the Reach, Rook believed discipline, not prophecy, had held the realm together during the dark times. He had no love for dragons, even less for men who once claimed a throne. When word reached him that a silver dragon had been spotted soaring beyond the Frostfangs, he wasted no time. He dipped a raven's quill in ink, scrawled a brief but cutting message, and tied it to the blackbird's leg. The dragon rides again. Then he watched it vanish into the clouds, headed south, to the capital, to the council, to the game, King's Landing, the Red Keep. The chambers of the small council had not changed much, still cold, still watchful, but the tension was different. Tyrion Lannister leaned on his cane as he walked the length of the table, his limp more pronounced after years of wear. Sam Tarly, grown heavy and pale from scroll work and sleepless nights, looked up from a page. There's unrest in the stepstones. Merchants being robbed. Dawn's silence grows longer. Bronn, Lord of Highgarden, drank wine without offering any commentary beyond a grunt. "Forget the stepstones," Tyrion said. "The real storm is here." They all turned to look at the end of the table. King Bran the Broken sat as always, unmoving, in the oak and silver chair. His eyes were open but distant, locked on something none of them could see. He hadn't spoken in days. "Still in the net," Sam said. "He's not dreaming," Tyrion murmured. "He's gone. The Queen returns." The bells rang for Sansa Stark when her procession arrived. She entered through the gate with her direwolf banners trailing behind. At her side rode Lady Brienne, her white armour dusted with red clay and travel. The people still called her the Wolf Queen. Within the halls of the Red Keep she walked alone to the throne room. Her eyes passed over the Iron Throne, not with longing but recognition. She found Tyrion waiting. "Queen Sansa," he said. "I left the crown behind," she answered. "The people haven't. Letters, lies, and prophecies." That night Sam read by candlelight the letter from Oldtown. He murmured it aloud to himself. In the days when the black flame rises again, and the ash-blooded air breathes fire into the bones of winter, a king shall rise who was once death. He looked up. "Jon." Tyrion met his eyes. "Then we better be ready, beyond the wall," the whisper in the ice. Jon stood alone beside Ghostfyre, high on the ridge above the lake. He knelt, pressing his palm into the ice again. It was warm. Ghostfyre exhaled smoke behind him. Jon whispered, "It's time." He rose and mounted the dragon. They took to the sky, silver and white against the storm, and flew south. Final line. The dragon had slept long enough. Chapter 3. The Council Fractures. The Queen in the South. The gates of the Red Keep creaked open to a chorus of whispers. Cold stone echoed beneath hoofbeats and boots as Queen Sansa Stark rode into King's Landing for the first time in over a decade. Not as a prisoner, not as a ward, not as a pawn in anyone's game. This time, she entered as the last sovereign queen in Westeros. Her Northmen rode in tight formation, armoured in polished ice-grey steel and black wool, bearing banners of the direwolf snapping against the wind. Beside her, Lady Brienne of Tarth sat astride a white destrier, sword at her hip, eyes scanning every balcony and alley. The people gathered silently along the main avenue. Some bowed, others didn't. Many simply stared, uncertain if they were witnessing a moment of salvation or the first crack in a new war, ghosts of the keep. Inside, the Red Keep was colder than she remembered. Sansa Stark moved slowly through the stone corridors, her boots whispering against worn marble. There were hints of the old scent, aged parchment, candle smoke, the faintest breath of winter in the draughty halls, but now it was overpowered by something darker, a lingering char, buried deep in the walls. The scent of scorched stone and melted iron, a grim reminder of the day Daenerys Targaryen brought fire and fury upon the capital. It clung to the place like a ghost. She passed faded portraits, half-burned tapestries, alcoves once thick with shadow and secrets. This was not the Red Keep of her girlhood. It was a tomb with ambition buried in every brick. Ahead loomed the throne room's heavy double doors. She paused before them. "Are you ready?" Brienne of Tarth asked softly, her voice a shield against the silence. "No," Sansa replied. "But I never was." They entered together. There was no court, no cheering crowd, only the small council, seated beneath the fractured beams and torchlight. Stone echoed with their stillness. Tyrion Lannister rose as she approached. His silvering hair and deeply lined face gave the impression of a man carrying too many winters. Yet his voice was as crisp as ever. "Queen Sansa, I'm not queen here. That may change." Her eyes shifted to the far end of the room. The Iron Throne had once been melted into a smouldering memory. In its place stood a simple silver-trimmed chair carved from oak and ash, etched with the sigils of the Six Kingdoms. There sat Bran the Broken, unmoving, his gaze lost in some endless horizon. Sansa walked slowly to him. His skin was paler than she remembered, his cheeks hollow. Samwell Tarly stood beside him, gently adjusting a heavy blanket across his lap. "Has he said anything?" Sansa asked. "Not in 12 days, Sam said. He eats, he breathes, but his mind is elsewhere." Sansa leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "He looks like he's dreaming." "I don't think it's a dream," Sam murmured. "It's deeper than that, like he's gone down, beneath something, caught in the roots of a tree too old for men to understand." Brienne took a cautious step forward. "Is he in danger?" Sam glanced at Tyrion, then back to Sansa. "We all are. The proposal." They gathered in the hands solar, firelight flickering off maps and aged wood. Tyrion spoke first. "We need leadership. Now." Sansa leaned forward. "You want me to take the throne." Tyrion didn't flinch. "I want the realm to survive the vacuum left in your brother's absence. You would not claim the throne. Yet, you would serve as Queen Regent, acting on his behalf until he recovers, if he recovers, and if he doesn't. We'll cross that bridge when we burn it," Bronn muttered from his corner seat, drinking deeply. Sansa ignored him. "Why not elect another king? Or bring in someone from the south?" "Because the south is waiting to devour itself," Tyrion said. "The Reach and Dawn are both marshalling troops. The Vale is too fractured. The Stormlands will only follow power. You are the only one with the legacy, the command, and the credibility to hold the realm together." Sam added quietly, "You're also the only monarch left unchallenged by history." Sansa narrowed her eyes. "And what if this is a trap? A soft coup disguised in flattery?" Tyrion smiled thinly. "Then you're already too late. Fault lines." The chamber darkened as the fire burned lower. Bronn leaned back in his chair, swirling wine. "I don't care who sits where," he said. "As long as the gold keeps flowing, the roads stay open, and no one burns the capital again. Make her queen, make her regent, crown a goat. Just don't let the realm fall into chaos. I've had enough of chaos. And yet you built your fortune in it. Tyrion shot back. Bronn smirked. Sam rose, laying a scroll on the table. This came from Oldtown. Tyrion unrolled it. Valyrian script glowed faintly in the candlelight. It speaks of a shadow stirring in the far north, a dragon in silver flame, and a name, Aegon. The room fell still. Sansa stood slowly. Jon. Sam nodded. Aegon Targaryen, yes, but still Jon to us. And he is returning. I believe Bran felt it before he fell. That's why he's silent. That's why the realm trembles. Tyrion looked into the fire. Then this isn't just about ruling the kingdoms. No, Sansa said. It's about holding them together long enough to see what the dragon brings. Doubt and firelight. That night, Sansa stood alone on the Red Keep's balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay. The wind tangled her hair. Below, lanterns flickered on merchant ships. Across the sky, clouds churned. She remembered the first time she'd stood here, a girl trembling in fear, clinging to lies and gowns and dreams. Now she was a woman carved in frost, and once again the South wanted to crown her. Once again the game whispered her name. Behind her, a raven landed on the stone balustrade. It bore no sigil. The message was short. You are not alone. The wolf still watches. Her breath caught. The handwriting rough, precise northern. Arya. Final scene. The small council reconvened. This time all eyes were on Sansa as she stepped forward and placed both hands on the edge of the table. Make no mistake, she said. If I take this role, I do so not for ambition, but to stop this realm from tearing itself apart. I will not be your puppet. I will not be your piece. She looked Tyrion in the eye. If I rise on my terms. Tyrion gave a faint bow of his head. As it should be. Bronn sighed. Then God's help us all. Final line. Sansa looked out toward the bay once more, wind in her hair, and said aloud, Then let them try and use me. Chapter 4. The flame in the frost. The night fought. They heard it first as a rumble, like a distant avalanche. Then came the roar. Not of any beast known to the living, but something older, deeper. A call that cracked the icicles along the night fort's ceiling and sent ravens shrieking into the sky. Ghostfyre's cry tore through the haunted corridors and shattered decades of silence. The great silver dragon had landed atop the night fort's central tower, wings outstretched, steam curling from his nostrils. His scales shimmered white-blue in the moonlight, like starlight caught in frost. The remaining watchmen, what few remained, stumbled from their bunks, blades drawn, hearts thundering. They'd heard tales of fire made flesh, of the fallen Lord Commander who once rode with the dead and came back burning, and now he stood before them again. Jon Snow, cloaked in black and draped in wolf fur, descended the steps of the tower, the dragon behind him like a moving glacier of muscle and breath. Snow swirled around them both, caught in a wind that seemed to come from nowhere and from everywhere. A young ranger with shaggy Skagosi hair stepped forward, knelt in the snow, and whispered, The flame reborn. She wasn't alone, more came to their knees. Not all, but enough to remind Jon of how kingdoms begin, oaths in the ice. By dawn, the night fort was stirring in ways it hadn't in years. Jon stood beside Tormund Giantsbane, who chewed on a strip of smoked goat and watched the watchman with a narrowed eye. Didn't think I'd live long enough to see black cloaks kneeling to you again, Tormund muttered. You sure you don't want the crown this time? Jon didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Ghostfyre, who lay curled at the base of a broken tower, wings tucked tight, one eye still watching. Tormund snorted. Yeah, that's what I thought. They walked together past campfires where free folk and watchmen shared meals, traded gear, and mended leathers. Lines had begun to blur. New tents rose daily. A banner, stitched from furs and ash-coloured cloth, was hoisted by a group of wildling boys. It bore a silver dragon, jaws open, wrapped in curling white fire. And beneath it, a dire wolf in profile, its eyes painted red. Jon paused. Who made that? Tormund grinned. Your new army looks like. Jon turned away without a word. But Tormund noticed the way his hand lingered on the hilt of Longclaw just a moment longer than usual. Shadows at Winterfell. Winterfell had grown quieter in Sansa's absence. The fires still burned. The larders remained stocked. But something beneath the stone had shifted, like the wolves in the walls had gone silent. That silence broke the night Arya Stark returned. She came as she always did, without warning. One moment the guards were alone at the gate. The next she stood between them, cloaked in dark leathers, eyes cold and sharp as Valyrian steel. Maester Hallis dropped his quill when he saw her in the great hall. Lady Lynessa, cousin to Ser Jorah, gave a start and bowed low. Arya offered no courtesies. Only questions. How many ravens have flown to Dawn in the past week? Who controls the trade at White Harbour now? Has anyone asked why the faceless men went quiet? They didn't have answers, but she did. The Triarchs of Volantis, she said, are funding mercenary bands in the Stepstones. The Golden Company didn't die with King's Landing. They splintered. Some are in Bravos, some in Tyrosh, all hungry, all watching. She pulled a coin from her pouch, blackened, circular, carved with a spider's web. This was given to a man in Gulltown. He was trying to hire swords with it. Maester Hallis paled. That mark hasn't been seen in Westeros in 2 generations. Arya nodded. Then it's time to ask why it's come back now. That night, she walked the crypts of Winterfell, stopping at her father's statue. The cold didn't bother her. We're all being called back, she said. All of us? The dream. Jon Snow slept restlessly that night. He dreamed of the Red Keep, bathed in orange and crimson. Flames licked the windows. Stone turned molten. The great towers melted like candles in a storm. He saw Daenerys barefoot in the ash, not angry, not cruel, just sad. Her eyes met his. She said nothing. Then the world turned white. He stood beneath a massive weirwood, its face carved in sorrow. Snow fell upward. Roots stretched out like veins into the sky. And beneath it sat Bran, his eyes blood red, his voice like wind in dead leaves. The flame must walk again, Bran whispered, or all will freeze. Jon jolted awake, sweat cold on his neck. Ghostfyre was already standing in the courtyard, wings half open, eyes locked on the horizon, waiting. Final line. The north had been quiet for too long, and now it began to burn. Chapter 5. The Blade Behind the Throne. Red Garden. The air in the Red Keep's lower garden was heavy with summer heat, but the stones still remembered fire. Sansa Stark walked in silence beneath the shade of a leafless tree, its bark charred, its branches twisted like the fingers of a dead hand. Beside her, Brienne of Tarth kept watch in her white and gold cloak, eyes scanning the path ahead. They had just passed a statue of Baelor the Blessed when the first whisper of danger came. Not a sound, but a feeling. Brienne's hand dropped to her sword before Sansa even turned. The attacker moved from behind a ruined column, a flicker of motion, a low hiss of breath, and then steel. A short, curved dagger flashed from a sleeve. The figure lunged for Sansa's heart. Brienne moved faster. Her blade swept upward, catching the attacker mid-thrust. Sparks flew as metal met metal. The cloaked figure twisted, agile, but Brienne slammed a mailed elbow into his chest, sending him reeling back against the garden wall. He tried to flee. Brienne tackled him. The assassin hit the stone with a grunt. Before she could pin him, his jaw clenched. He bit down. Foam bubbled at his lips. Blood dripped from his nose. By the time she turned him over, he was already gone. Steel and shadows. He was silent the entire time, Brienne said later, wiping blood from her gauntlet. Didn't scream, didn't beg, just waited. Tyrion stood in the corridor outside Sansa's solar, face tight with fury. He died too easily. That was a message, not a murder. A warning, Sansa said, seated, cloak draped over her shoulders. She hadn't flinched during the debrief. Tyrion studied her. Do you feel threatened? I feel surrounded. Under the stones. Arya didn't wait for orders. That night, she moved through the back alleys of the capital, face shrouded in one of her many masks, this time a tired washerwoman with a limp. She followed a name whispered by a raven master. then followed that name to a tavern boy who delivered letters sealed with honey wax and no crest. She found him outside the city walls. By morning, he was gone. But he had revealed the map. A network of spies and smugglers, stretching from the docks of King's Landing to the inns of Highgarden, the salt markets of Sunspear, and even ships flying banners of neutrality through the stepstones. They weren't sharing just troop movements or trade reports. They were tracking names: Sansa, Arya, Jon. Someone was coordinating resistance to any Stark in power. Arya left a single message on the desk of a brothel keeper who had lied twice. The many-faced god sees you. Cracks in the council. The small council chamber had never felt so full of knives. Bronn sat lounging with his boots on the table, sipping from a golden cup. I'm just saying, not everyone likes the idea of another Stark ruling from a southern chair, and not everyone wants a sellsword rewriting history, Tyrion snapped. Bronn raised an eyebrow. I helped win half the wars you all sing about. I've earned my say. Sam remained quiet, thumbing through an old scroll, occasionally glancing toward Sansa. She had said little since the attempt. I have no interest in a throne, Sansa said at last. Voice, even. But if this council cannot secure its own hall, it's unfit to rule anything. Now that sounds like a queen, Bronn muttered. The Blade's legacy. Later, in the Citadel archives stored within the Red Keep, Sam Tarly studied the assassin's blade. He cleaned the steel, exposed the edge to flame, and watched how the metal responded. It was Valyrian, too small for a warrior's blade, too delicate for open war. But the shape, the curve, the hilt, it matched something in the older records. Sam flipped through the vellum. There, a drawing, a notation. Dagger of the Mockingbird. Pitya Baelish's knife. Sam whispered, Littlefinger. He sat back slowly, chilled to the marrow. Littlefinger was dead. Arya had slit his throat herself. Sansa had watched it happen. So why was his blade back in the game? Arya stood in the shadow of the council chamber, staring down at the curved dagger laid across Sam's palms. It was the same weight, the same balance. She knew it well. If the blade has returned, she whispered, then the game has begun again. Final line. And this time they wouldn't play it nicely. Chapter 6. The Return of the Dragon. The sky split like a wound. It began with thunder, no storm, no clouds, just thunder. A low, rolling groan across the skies of the north. Atop the crumbling towers of Eastwatch by the Sea, the last defenders of the wall looked skyward. Some fell to their knees. Others whispered old prayers, and then they saw it. Ghostfyre. Wings wider than any ship's sail, a beast born of snow and ash, pearl-white scales gleaming with heat-veined silver. Fire churned in its belly, but its cry was cold. The North remembered dragons. It remembered fear. Jon Snow rode on its back, cloaked in furs and silence, Ghostfyre's saddle woven from old black leather and free folk wolf pelts. His hair was longer, streaked with grey, and his eyes were shadowed like men who've outlived their purpose. But they recognized him, and they followed. From the ruins of the wall to the edge of the gift, the army grew. Wildlings came first, Tormund's kin and the scattered clans of the Frost Rivers. Some rode shaggy muskoxen. Others walked with nothing but spears and bone charms. Then came the outcasts, hedge knights who had refused oaths to southern lords, sworn swords who had once followed Daenerys and vanished after her fall, and even a few pale-eyed, unsullied, tired of exile in foreign lands. They called him king. He did not answer to it. "We march," was all he said. They passed last hearth in silence. No banners flew, no horns were sounded, but every ravaged village they passed fed the fire. The realm stirs. In King's Landing, the small council was already fractured. Arya had returned days earlier with whispered reports of Essosi warlords eyeing Westeros like carrion birds. Her presence unsettled the nobles, though no one dared say it aloud. She was no longer a girl. She was a blade with a face, and shadows seemed to cling to her boots. When the first raven arrived, its scroll burned at the edges. It carried but 3 words. The dragon returns. Sam dropped the scroll in the council chamber. Bronn spilled wine. Tyrion turned pale, then quietly asked for a stronger drink. "It's him," Sam said. "He survived, and now rides a bloody dragon," Bronn muttered. "We're all dead." "No," Sansa said, her voice cold but steady. "He's come to remind them." "Remind them of what?" Tyrion asked. "Of who kept the peace," she replied. "And who paid the price?" "The streets of smoke." By the time Ghostfyre shadowed the fields near Maidenpool, smoke was already rising from King's Landing. Not from dragonfire, but from panic. Rumours spread like fever through the capital, that Aegon Targaryen lived, that he had come to claim the throne, that Bran the Broken had fallen into eternal sleep because he sensed Jon's return. In Flea Bottom, riots broke out. One group waved a torn Stark banner, chanting the true king returns. Another cursed dragons and the gods. The gold cloaks were forced to wall off the lower streets. A merchant's guild hall burned. A sept collapsed under a mob. Tyrion stood on the Red Keep's highest balcony with Sam beside him, watching the city churn. "He doesn't want the throne," Sam whispered. "No," Tyrion muttered, "but that doesn't matter anymore. The reckoning." Jon arrived without warning, just before dawn, just after the last stars surrendered to grey light. Ghostfyre descended beyond the ruins of the dragon pit, his wings cutting the fog apart like sails through smoke. The ground cracked beneath his talons as he landed, heat rippling through stone that had once known dragonfire and ruin. Soldiers rushed toward the field, spears raised, then faltered. Some lowered their weapons, others dropped to one knee. A few simply stared, mouths open, as if witnessing a ghost made flesh. Word spread faster than ravens. "Jon Snow lives." He dismounted alone. No banners announced him, no horns sounded. He wore no crown, bore no sigil, only a black cloak faded to charcoal, Longclaw at his side, and the unmistakable weight of years carved into his posture. His hair was longer now, streaked with grey, his face harder. But when people saw his eyes, some smiled, others turned away. As Jon walked through the lower streets toward the Red Keep, the city reacted in fragments. A woman clutched her child and whispered his name like a prayer. A butcher spat into the street and muttered dragon spawn. A one-legged veteran bowed so deeply his forehead touched stone. A septon made the sign of the seven and backed into a doorway. The city did not agree on him. And that, Jon realized, was the most honest thing about King's Landing. The gates of the Red Keep opened without ceremony. Inside, the corridors still smelled faintly of smoke and ash, the scars of Daenerys' fire never fully erased. Guards lined the walls in uneasy silence as Jon passed. No one stopped him. He reached the throne room alone. The doors creaked open. Bran Stark sat awake, not alert, not fully present, but upright in his silver-trimmed chair, eyes open, unfocused, gazing not at the hall but through it. His fingers rested lightly on the armrests, unmoving. Breathing slow, measured, dreaming while awake, Jon stopped short. For a moment, the world narrowed to the two of them. "You're here," Bran said softly. The words echoed strangely as if spoken from a great distance. Jon swallowed. "I am." Bran's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "You were always coming back." Footsteps sounded behind him. Sansa. She stood at the edge of the hall, wolf-grey cloak clasped at her throat, posture straight, face carefully composed. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she crossed the floor and embraced him. It was brief, fierce, necessary. "I thought you were dead," she said quietly. "I tried," Jon replied. Arya reached them next. She didn't hug him at first, just looked at his face, searching for something she'd lost long ago. Then she punched his shoulder, hard. "You still walk like you expect knives," she said. "And you still hide them," Jon answered. They laughed, softly, awkwardly. The moment didn't last. It never does. The doors opened again. Tyrion entered first, leaning on his cane, eyes sharp and tired all at once. Sam followed, clutching scrolls he already knew by heart. Bronn sauntered in last, expression unreadable, hand never far from his belt. And nearly 20 nervous guards. The room shifted. Jon turned to face them. "I don't want your throne," he said, before anyone else could speak. His voice was calm, but it carried. "I don't want crowns or titles or songs. I want the truth." Tyrion studied him. "That's a dangerous request." "Good," Jon said. "I'm tired of safe lies." Bronn scoffed. "You come riding a dragon and expect honesty?" Jon met his gaze. "I came because the realm is bleeding again, and I want to know why." Silence stretched. Then Jon spoke again, slower now, each word deliberate. "Who kept the peace? Who paid the price? Who still bleeds for the choices made in fire?" No one answered. Bran's eyes flickered. The air changed. A roar tore through the hall. Stone shuddered. Dust fell from the rafters. The great balcony doors burst open as Ghostfyre surged forward, wings half spread, head lowering into the chamber. Heat rolled through the room like a living thing. Torches flared wildly. Guards stumbled back. Bronn reached instinctively for his blade. Sam froze. Tyrion closed his eyes. Sansa did not move. Neither did Jon. Ghostfyre's roar echoed once more, shaking the bones of the Red Keep, reminding every soul present that dragons were not myths, and judgment did not always come wearing a crown. And in that moment, with fire at their backs and silence in their throats, the realm understood the dragon had not come to rule. He had come to make them answer. Final line. And in that silence, with ash still in the walls and smoke still rising from the streets, the kingdoms knew the dragon had not come to rule. He had come to judge. Chapter 7. A Kingdom of Bones. The small council fractures. The chamber felt colder than usual. Or perhaps it was just the silence that followed Ghostfyre's departure. Smoke still clung to the rafters. Bits of loosened stone dust floated down, catching in candlelight. Tyrion stood at the head of the council table, staring at the space where Ghostfyre's head had hung moments ago. Wine stained his sleeve. His eyes were dark and sunken, his lips dry. "This," he muttered, "is how kingdoms die." Davos Seaworth, seated beside him, tapped his fingers against the wood. "Or how they're saved." Bronn scoffed from the end of the table, boots up, hand on his sword hilt. "He rides a bloody dragon. You think that's saving anything?" "He's not demanding the throne," Sam interjected from behind a pile of scrolls. "He asked questions. Questions we've all ignored." Bronn waved his hand. Questions from a ghost. He was supposed to be dead. Now he shows up with fire and fury and expects what? Absolution. "No," said a voice from the doorway. Sansa entered, flanked by Brienne, her eyes hollow but clear. "He expects justice. Cracks in the crown." Sansa moved to her seat, once Cersei's, long since stripped of lions and gold, now draped in stark grey velvet. She didn't sit. "Jon wants no crown," she said. "But if we ignore him, others will give it to him." Bronn raised an eyebrow. "And if they do?" "Then the 7 kingdoms break again." Tyrion finally moved. "We're already broken. Look around, Your Grace." He gestured to the room. "We are ruling over ash, splinters, and memory." The Reach grumbles. Dawn whispers rebellion. And the stepstones are infested with cell sails, who take coin from anyone but us. "And you think bending to Jon will fix that?" Bronn said, eyes narrowing. "A bastard come back with fire." Sansa stepped forward. "He's not a bastard." A pause. Tyrion exhaled. "Aegon Targaryen. A sister's plea. That night, in the Queen's Solar, Sansa found Jon staring out the window over the Blackwater Rush. The glow of the city barely reached this high. "You should leave," she said gently. "I just arrived." "I know. That's why it's dangerous." Jon didn't answer. He turned his gaze to the waters, then to the scorched ruins beyond the Red Keep. "The North cannot always stand alone," he said quietly. "We've done it before." "At what cost?" She stepped beside him, her hand brushing his cloak. "People still see you as a threat." "I am... to what?" He looked at her. "Lies," he said. "The game begins again." In the shadows of the castle corridors, Arya Stark moved like smoke. She had no room, no post, no guards. Just footsteps that left no echo. She had followed servants, listened at doors, watched ravens fly from rookery towers late at night, and now she stood before her sister in the Queen's hall. "They're playing the game again," Arya said. Sansa looked up from her writing desk. "Which game?" "The only one they ever play here. Thrones?" "No," Arya whispered. "Survival. A man adrift." Tyrion sat alone in the council chamber long after the others had gone. A single candle burned beside him, his cup long emptied. He stared at the remains of the day, scrolls, maps, and letters smeared with wax. He remembered the ashes, the screams, the moment Daenerys had burned the bells and made him choose between the mad and the merciful. And now he saw Jon Snow, the man who'd vanished into snow and myth, returned with fire of his own. He drank again. It tasted like blood. He laughed once. It echoed too long. Then he whispered into the dark. History doesn't repeat. It circles the drain. Final line. And in the flickering torchlight of the council chamber, as loyalties cracked like old stone, the game began anew. Sharper, colder, and hungrier than ever before. Chapter 8. Fire from Stone. The sky burns. It began with a feeling, a wrongness in the air. Ghostfyre soared above the ruins of the dragon pit, his wings stretched like vast sails of silver flame. He glided over the city with unnatural grace, trailing shadows across domes and alleyways. Below, King's Landing stirred uneasily. The docks were quieter than usual. Birds flew inland from Blackwater Bay in erratic, frightened patterns. The city could feel it. Jon stood on a parapet of the Red Keep, watching Ghostfyre turn in slow, lazy circles. He had grown too used to the dragon's silence, its dominance of the skies. He forgot that silence is often the stillness before violence. The first bolt came from a hidden siege tower behind the ruins of Maegor's holdfast. It was cloaked in painted canvas and draped in crumbling cloth, blending into the rot and dust. The ballista fired without a horn. No warning, no mercy. A spear the size of a tree trunk screamed through the sky and slammed into Ghostfyre's left flank, piercing scale and flesh with a sickening crack. The dragon shrieked, a raw, terrible sound that echoed through every stone in the city. Jon's eyes widened. Then a second bolt ripped through the air. This one missed, grazing the edge of Ghostfyre's wing, but the third struck the base of his tail, exploding into shards. The great beast twisted mid-air, trailing fire and blood, crashing into the hillside outside the dragon pit with such force that the ground shook as if a second doom had come. And then came the fire. Ghostfyre rose, one wing broken, eyes glowing like molten silver. He roared, a sound of pain and wrath blended into one, and unleashed a stream of white-hot fire onto the towers that had ambushed him. Stone shattered. Men screamed. One tower exploded, another melted. The harbour beyond caught flame as the dragon's fury turned to the ships. A dozen galleys destroyed in moments, their sails vaporized, their crews incinerated where they stood. Smoke rose high into the sky, thick and black. The garden blades. Inside the Red Keep, Sansa was walking the royal garden, guarded but not armoured. Brienne walked beside her, wounded but restless, refusing to remain bedbound. The pair moved beneath the ash-scorched branches of the dead heart tree transplanted from Winterfell. Brienne froze. So did the air. She turned just in time to see a figure leap from behind a twisted pillar. The assassin's blade was curved, oil-slicked, and aimed for Sansa's neck. Brienne took the strike across the back, armour spitting from the force, but her body holding firm. She shoved Sansa behind her and drew steel in one motion, parrying a second blow from another hidden assailant. Two more cloaked figures emerged from the trees, moving fast. One held a blowgun, the other a long dagger already blooded. Brienne fought through pain, her sword moving in tight, brutal arcs. A thrown knife grazed Sansa's arm. She staggered. Blood dripped onto the stone. Then came the arrow, and Arya's hunt. Arya Stark landed silently on the stone banister above the garden, dropped from a second-story window with all the grace of a shadow falling through light. Her dagger was out before she hit the ground. The blowgun assassin turned in time to catch Arya's blade between the ribs. She rolled over the body, grabbing his fallen weapon, and hurled it like a spear into the thigh of the second attacker as he lunged for Sansa again. Brienne rose, bleeding, swaying, but stayed standing. The last assassin turned and ran. Arya was already in pursuit. She chased him through the kitchens, past startled servants, through the throne hall's shattered side chamber and into the rookery, where he tried to climb. He got one hand on a ledge before she grabbed his ankle and snapped him to the floor like a thrown bag of meat. "Who sent you?" she hissed. His answer was a grin and a bitten tongue. He choked, bled, and died with a Dornish coin clutched in his hand, the letter and the name. Later, Arya stood in the Queen's solar, bloodied and silent. On the table in front of her was a sealed letter. Sam broke the seal with trembling fingers. The parchment bore 3 names: Sansa Stark, Jon Snow. At the bottom, a sun and spear with the words, "Signed by agreement, Bronn of Highgarden." Arya looked up. "He sold us all. Trial by fire." Bronn didn't deny it. When the council gathered in the throne room, still open to the sky after Ghostfyre's fury, Bronn stood at the centre with arms crossed, 5 guards at his back. "You took Dornish coin," Jon said. "They offered gold, land, and survival," Bronn replied. "You offer lectures. You sent knives after a queen," Arya said flatly. "I sent knives after problems," Bronn snapped. Tyrion sat silently, guilt coiling in his gut. Sam looked ready to vomit. Jon stepped forward. "Then draw?" Bronn blinked. "You serious?" Jon drew Longclaw. "You wanted fire? Face it. The duel was vicious. Bronn fought dirty, fast, smart. Jon fought like a man carrying judgment in his blade. Sparks flew. Blood hit the floor. The guards didn't intervene. No one did. Bronn almost won. He grazed Jon's cheek, slashed his thigh, nearly disarmed him. But Jon endured. He absorbed pain. He learned the rhythm. And finally, he drove Longclaw through Bronn's sword arm, dropping him to his knees. Bronn panted, bleeding. "Do it," he spat. Jon didn't. Instead, he nodded once. "Chain him. Exile." They dragged Bronn through the harbour as fires still smouldered in the docks. He was bound in iron, stripped of titles, and spat on by half the city. A single galley waited, a black-sailed ship bound for Sunspear. Jon stood at the pier as Bronn was marched up the gangplank. "If you return," Jon said, "Ghostfyre won't miss next time." Bronn smiled, broken and bruised. "You'll miss me." The ship sailed. No banners waved, just smoke, the throne that was. That night, Jon walked alone into the ruined throne room. The firelight flickered through the arched balcony. Wind howled from the harbour. Ash blew across the marble floor. Where the Iron Throne once stood, there was now only stone, molten, blackened, cracked at the base, as if the very idea of kingship had melted from within. Jon stood in silence. Sansa entered, slow and limping. Brienne followed, bandaged and silent. Arya leaned in the archway. Sam and Tyrion came last, both men older in spirit than they had been that morning. Jon looked to the ruined stone. "It's gone," Sansa said. "No," Jon whispered. "It just doesn't wear steel anymore. Final line. The fire was out." The throne was gone. But the game would never die. Chapter 9. The Last Council. The room where peace might begin. The small council chamber smelled of smoke, stone, and ink. Its great circular table, once scorched and repaired after Daenerys' fall, now bore the weight of something heavier than war, the burden of what comes after. The hour was late, the sky outside a steel grey. 12 chairs were arranged in a perfect circle. For once, they were all filled. At one end sat Sansa Stark, robed in dark grey with silver thread, a small circlet of weirwood and iron resting lightly on her brow. She wore the North openly, its grief, its grit, and its sharp pride. At the other, in worn black leathers, sat Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen by blood, Stark by heart, and a man now weathered by war, fire, exile, and silence. Between them sat the realm's last voices, consisting of Samwell Tarly, Tyrion Lannister, Davos Seaworth, Edmure Tully, Arya Stark, Brienne of Tarth, Gendry Baratheon, Yara Greyjoy, the new lord of the Reach Garan Bronn's eldest son. Tormund Giantsbane and the Free Folk Elders, and the new Dornish Prince Maelor, all gathered to once again name a new ruler of the 8 kingdoms that now includes the kingdom of the true North. Edmure Tully stood suddenly, smoothing the front of his doublet with far more confidence than sense. "If I may?" he began, clearing his throat with the practiced dignity of a man who had spent too long rehearsing. As Lord of Riverrun, veteran of 2 wars, and having served the realm with honour. Sansa turned her head slowly toward him. Her expression was patient, regal, and cold. "Uncle," she said, "please sit down." Edmure paused mid-sentence, lips parted. He blinked. Then, shoulders slumping, he sat. A new proposition. It was Sam who rose first, scrolls in hand, eyes tired but clear. He looked around the table and cleared his throat. 7 times we've crowned kings and queens in this chamber, he said. 7 times we've watched them rule alone, and 7 times we've buried realms in ash and blood. He unrolled a parchment. It's time for something else. He placed the scroll on the table. No throne. No one true king. I propose a great council. A ruling body made of the 8 kingdoms. Let each region choose its voice, and let those voices shape the realm together. A few murmurs stirred. Yara frowned. Gendry rubbed his jaw. The Dornish prince folded his arms. Sansa leaned forward, her tone calm, but her eyes hard. There are only 7 kingdoms. Sam looked at her directly. Not any more. The free folk speak for the land beyond the wall, and they deserve a seat. The free folk envoy, a scarred woman named Arya Snow, nodded silently. Jon looked at Sam, just for a moment, and gave the slightest nod. For Jon, before the next noble could rise, a deep chuckle echoed through the council chamber. Heads turned as Tormund Giantsbane, massive and wild as ever, stood at the edge of the hall. His red beard had greyed at the edges, but his eyes still burned like coals in a storm. "You lords and ladies love your chairs and your councils," he said, voice booming. "But I know a king when I see one. And it's not the one sitting there like a ghost." He jabbed a thick finger toward Bran, or the one dreaming of more crowns. He turned toward Jon. He bled for the living. He crossed ice and fire to stop the long night. "You talk of bloodlines. He earned his claim with scars. We called him Wolf King beyond the wall. He never wanted it. That's why he deserves it." Next, there was Gendry Baratheon, who rose stiffly from his seat near the back, broad-shouldered, forge-marked, and regal in only the roughest sense. "I'm not good at speeches," he said plainly. "But I owe my life to Jon Snow." He looked around the room. "You all talk like this is a game of pieces on a board. Jon was the only one who didn't treat me like a pawn when I learned who I really was. He never cared I was a bastard. He didn't kneel to dragons or run from fire. He just fought for everyone." Gendry's gaze hardened. "If anyone here deserves the throne, it's him." Then he looked at Jon. "But I know you won't take it, so maybe it's time we stop trying to crown kings and start listening to the ones who refuse it. Wolf and dragon." Sansa stood. "Councils speak in circles. Thrones command." Her voice was crisp but quiet. "For years, I rejected the idea of ruling all 7, 8 kingdoms. But the world is bleeding. We need structure, leadership, continuity." She turned, scanning the faces around the table. "I would stand for queen. Of the 8 kingdoms. I don't ask for it as a birthright. I ask as one who has bled and lost and endured. The North is ready to guide the rest, as we always have from the snow." Jon remained still, every eye turned to him. He didn't speak. Not yet. Ironborn rises. From her seat draped in dark sea salt leathers, Yara Greyjoy rose next. The room tensed, not out of fear, but anticipation. Her voice had not yet spoken, and when it did, it cut like a tide through still waters. "I speak not just for the Iron Islands," she began. "I speak for the memory of a queen who believed in breaking the wheel." Eyes turned toward her, some cautious, some hostile. Jon held her gaze. "I watched Daenerys Stormborn burn down the slavers' cities. I sailed her ships into battle. I saw her fall, yes, but I never forgot who ended her story. The weight of her accusation settled over the table like a storm cloud. You stabbed your queen in the heart, Yara said coldly. You broke your oath, and you ran, while we bled and buried our dead. Brienne shifted uneasily. Arya's jaw tightened. Sansa leaned back, unreadable. Yara turned to Sansa. You would be a fine queen, I think. Steady. Cold when needed. Like the sea. Then back to the table. But make no mistake, if we crown him, the man who murdered Daenerys, then everything we fought for becomes ash and lies. Her gaze swept the room. If there's to be a council, then let it begin with justice, or we are nothing but another mask on the same old face. She sat without another word. Jon said nothing. His expression didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes shifted. The lion's last words. Tyrion rose slowly. The room fell still. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder in the quiet chamber. I've served queens who burned cities, kings who murdered families, councils who did nothing but bicker while the world fell apart. He turned to Jon. And I have served a man who never wanted power, and because of that, became the only one I've ever trusted with it. To Sansa, you are strong, you are wise, and you would rule well. But peace, true peace, is not forged by fire or thrones. It's built by letting go. He placed a small object on the table, his hand's pin. I speak now not as a lion, or a hand, or a Lannister. I speak as a man who has nothing left but one last word. He looked at Jon. My last vote is yours. Do what none of us ever could. End it. The choosing begins. Brienne stood. Her armor still bore the mark of the blade she had taken for Sansa. I speak for the queen in the north. Her loyalty, her courage, and her judgment are beyond question. I owe my life to her. Then Davos Seaworth stood. He looked to Jon, his voice gravel and salt. I saw kings come and go, but I only followed one into hell, and I followed you beyond it. He turned to the council. Jon Snow is the only reason any of us are breathing. If this vote matters, my blade is with him. The break. The tension snapped like ice underfoot. Jon rose slowly. He looked at every face around the table, then down at the table itself, scarred, stained, cracked in places. Like all of them. My name is Aegon Targaryen, he said. Some stiffened. I didn't ask for it. I never wore it. I tried to bury it beyond the wall. He looked at Sansa, then Arya, then Sam. And I'm done burying things. His fist slammed down on the table. No more kings, no more queens, no more gods or dragons on thrones. He turned, cloak sweeping behind him. You want peace? He said over his shoulder. Then stop chasing crowns. And just like that, Aegon Targaryen walked out of the room. He didn't look back, and the ever-so-quiet Arya chased after him. Final line. Behind him no crown was given, only silence, and the beginning of something new. Chapter 10. The New Dawn. A choice made by many. The throne room was empty now. Just stone, ash, and the memory of power. The Iron Throne was gone, melted into slag by dragons or fate. In its place, the council chamber stood as the beating heart of Westeros's rebirth. 12 hours had passed since Jon's departure. The vote had stalled, but it hadn't died. It was Samwell Tarly who returned first, parchment in hand, ink still drying. He laid it on the center of the round table. No crests, no sigils. Only one title across the top, the Accord of the Eight. It proposed the foundation of a new order, a Senate of Realms. 3 senators would be named from each kingdom. Each kingdom could decide how to appoint or elect their voices, whether by blood, vote, trial, or tradition. They would convene once each season, and no single crown would rest above them. Power, finally, was to be shared. Davos, Brienne, and Tyrion backed it without pause. Tormund gave a grunt of approval and scrawled an X for the free folk. Even the Dornish Prince Maelor, ever sceptical, gave a nod after securing clauses for regional autonomy. Gendry hammered the seal of Storm's End onto the scroll. Sansa hesitated. She stood before the table, hands clasped behind her back, the weight of Winterfell in every breath. "I wanted a crown," she said, voice low. "But perhaps the realm needs something older than crowns." Then she turned and walked out in silence, her banner untarnished, her pride intact, her purpose changed, of sisters and farewells. The harbour was quiet when Arya found Aegon Targaryen. Ghostfyre slept on the cliffs above, tail curled around the scorched remnants of the outer wall. Aegon stood on the dock, wind tugging his dark hair, eyes fixed on the open sea. Arya stepped beside him, quiet for a long moment. "You still run," she said. "And you still chase," Jon replied, smirking faintly. She didn't return the smile. "I'm going west. Beyond the maps. The old maesters say nothing lies out there, which means everything does." Aegon nodded, staring into the distance. "The world we knew burned, Arya. Maybe there's another one waiting." She touched his arm gently. "Don't come after me this time." He turned to her, truly turned, and pulled her into a fierce embrace. She held him just as tightly. "I won't," he said, "but send word if you find anything worth living for." Arya grinned as she pulled away. "I already have. The Queen in the north." Sansa returned to Winterfell without ceremony. The snows had fallen again by the time she crossed the gates. She stepped into the great hall. The people bowed, not because they were told, but because she had kept them whole through fire, famine, and foreign war. The northern lords met her in the godswood that night. She sat beneath the weirwood, silent and still, her crown untouched at her side. When she finally spoke, she said only this: "Let the South have their counsel. We will have our future." And they swore loyalty again, not to a throne, but to her, the dragon's path. The wind screamed as Ghostfyre soared south. The black beast cut across the sky like a fallen star, his great wings stirring clouds, his rider a shadow in the saddle. Aegon Targaryen rode without armor, without title, just a sword at his hip and purpose in his heart. He passed over the ruins of Valyria as the sun began to set, where smoke still curled from broken spires and molten rivers split the land. He wasn't chasing a throne. He was following whispers of wings seen in the night of Drogon. If the last dragon lived, then so did the fire. The eye reopens. Bran the Broken stirred. His hand twitched. Then his eyes opened, white and endless as snow. Ravens screamed across the sky above King's Landing. And Bran whispered, his voice like the rustle of leaves in winter. The wheel was never broken. But now it turns, final line. And so began the first day of the world reborn, not ruled by crowns or chains, but shaped by choice, fire, and the echoes of what came before. Epilogue. The eyes that never closed. In the highest tower of the Red Keep, beneath glass-blown windows and whispers of time, Bran the Broken sat alone. The maesters had long stopped trying to wake him. The guards posted at his door now only shifted to stretch aching legs, certain their king was gone in all but name. But Bran's eyes were open, not to the room, not to the day, to something deeper. He sat in stillness as ravens gathered along the ledge, dozens of them, then hundreds. Their wings rustled like the pages of history flipping too quickly. Their eyes were white, their minds were one, and Bran was there with them, watching ships slip west beyond maps, watching dragons wheel above ruins of fire, watching the kingdoms below start to rebuild under no crown but choice. A soft wind stirred the curtains as he exhaled. Then, for the first time in moons, his lips parted. "The wheel was never broken," he whispered. "But now it turns." Outside, a single white raven soared into the morning sky, and far to the south, a shadow stirred above the ruins of Valyria. Not Ghostfyre, something older. Thank you for joining us on this journey through fire, blood, and the last echo of a song long sung. If you loved The Last Dragon, Aegon Targaryen's War, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more epic stories from Westeros and beyond, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Aegon have taken the crown? Is Ghostfyre the last dragon? Or has the wheel finally turned? Until then, keep your sword sharp, your secrets closer, and your eyes on the skies. Written by Brian M. Brumbaugh. Narrated by Gareth Spokensuch.